My name is Alison Ackroyd. I have taught in further education for a very long time. I'm currently at Mid Kent College in Gillingham in Kent, and I've been here for about 10 years teaching on vocational science. Currently, I teach BTEC Applied Science and T-level Science, laboratory science, sciences as my specialism. I've also for a long time been the STEM champion for the department, which means that I try and arrange lots of outreach events for my students. I get them involved in community events, working with primary school children and the wider community. And I generally go around trying to get people interested in STEM. So I do a lot of work on in-house college media and LinkedIn, just trying to raise the profile of what I do with my students and trying to make connections with other kind of like-minded individuals to try and bring them in to help us do our job. There's so much you can do with the T-level, and I think that's nice. Obviously, you've got extra hours associated with funding, which makes a huge difference. It means that you can really design your curriculum yourself. You are not kind of moribund by particular assignments that you've got to follow in the first year. You can really stretch them with what you know to be good that's out there. So my colleagues, or all of the people that I work with, either have a research background or a background in industry. So they've been able to take stuff that they've used and adapt it for what they're delivering. And I've done the same for my lessons where I can. What I've been able to do, what's great for me, is this idea that I can be creative with the curriculum, and I can make it more zingy because I can bring in these extra strands that I know about. So I'm not just teaching about microscopy, for instance. I can relate it to a career. Now, for our students, we've tried along the way to do everything with an occupational mindset in mind. You need to think about practicals from, the beginning to the end. So you need to think about what you would do in the lab, so clearing up at the end, disposing of chemicals, troubleshooting protocols as well when they go wrong. You need to kind of embrace the problems and run with them with your students. A root tip squash is a very neat little practical for looking at cell division underneath the microscope. You can take some root tips, and it's usually from garlic. Right at the end of the root tips is where the growth is taking place. And you can break open the cells and stain them, and you get some really beautiful pictures of cells that are undergoing division. And you're staining the chromosomes inside them. Technically, it's quite a difficult practical to get to work because it is a very kind of strict protocol with timings and amounts. And this really mirrors what goes on in industry. In industry, we have these standard operating procedures that you've got to follow to the letter. So the students have to follow this procedure very accurately. And then at the end of it, they get some beautiful slides with cells undergoing division. And what I've left out of the equation is that not many cells undergo division. And what you see mostly are cells that are in the in-between stages. So what this practical also teaches is really perseverance. You are looking for something and it might not be immediately apparent. And what kind of parallels can we draw with industry? Well, there are lots of kind of diagnostic tests that are carried out in health. So I'm thinking of things like biopsies, where people might be looking at cells underneath the microscope and really scrutinizing samples. And it's that eye for detail that you've got to develop. Perhaps one of the best examples might be, a cervical smear test. You're looking for abnormal cells. So you've stained some cells, you're looking at them underneath a microscope, and you're looking for abnormalities. It takes an eye for detail and patience to locate those. It also, it's a skill job. So people that do this train for many years to do this job. So there are parallels with things like pathology. In terms of fitting in the root tip squash into the whole kit and caboodle of T-level science, these sections of the specification, they're not discrete, they overlap with many other areas. The experiment is an experiment that involves staining and using the microscope. And this ties in with content that we did at the beginning of the year, which was to do with using the microscope and what I would call a differential staining technique, identifying things using different stains. In T-level science, you have to also talk about scientific methodology and also different pieces of equipment. So you can get that angle in there. And there's always an angle for careers. I'm going to be looking at ethics in terms of, who is allowed to look at your health information. So we've looked at chromosomes, but in a wider context, chromosomes are looked at on a routine level for people having children, people that maybe want to have children, but maybe have, a genetic condition that runs in their family, people that maybe have a recently diagnosed genetic condition. How do you handle that information? So there's a kind of link there. Also, because chromosomes are made of DNA, I'm going to go back to my work on genomics, and there's a lot of genomics in T-level science, in biology. And by genomics, I mean your DNA. And that it is a really hot field in terms of ethics and also big data. And there are direct parallels to the NHS. The NHS has invested millions in their genomics program, because in my lifetime, and certainly in the students' lifetime, this idea of personalized medicine and knowing how your genetics, your genome, your DNA will influence your health is a big deal. And you can look at your genome at the level of chromosomes, as we do on a root tip squash, and you can look at it at the level of your DNA, which is what I'm going to go on to do. So that there's always a link between one thing and another. There's so much you can bring in. Sometimes it's just difficult knowing which bit you're going to mention in a lesson, but I'm always referring back to other stuff. And it's a nice way as well of kind of reinforcing what you've done earlier on. It's a jigsaw, it all fits together. There are some overlapping pieces. And that's what's so great about T-level, is this ability to bring together many different strands. You're not just teaching about what is going on at the end of a garlic root tip. There are bigger ramifications for this particular practical.